So pretty much the rest of this section is going to focus on learning about the built-in data types and also doing a couple of exercises around them. So here are all the built-in data types in the Dart programming language. Some of these we've already encountered like numbers and strings, but there's also very useful data structure types like lists, maps, and sets that we need to learn about. Some of these like symbols and null values we'll talk about in more detail in later sections of the course. Now, it should be noted, these data types also have built-in attributes or methods. Now, we're not going to cover every single attribute or method for every single data type because that would just take hours and hours, and often you don't actually use every single attribute. Instead, we're going to introduce the most useful and commonly used attributes or method calls. Let me show you an example of an attribute call and then an example of a method call. So when we're thinking about attributes and methods, you will notice that as you're typing along in Dartpad, after you define a variable name, you're going to be able to hit that variable name, hit dot, and then you'll see a list of all the attributes and methods available for that particular data type object. So you can see here, S1 is a string, and if I say S1 dot, I will end up getting a list of all the attributes and methods associated with this particular data type. And in this case, these are attributes and methods associated with a string. So what's the difference between an attribute and a method? Well, an attribute can be thought of as a piece of information or data about the instance. So I have an instance of a string where I say S1 is equal to this is a string. And then an attribute of that string or a piece of information of that string could be how long is this string? How many characters are there? In that case, I can say S1 dot, and then a very useful attribute is length. Something to note here is attributes are just going to say dot and then the name of the attribute with no open and close parentheses around them. This is actually slightly different than a method. So let's take a look at a method example. A method usually performs some action on the object or is going to return something based on a transformation of the object. And it often actually returns a new object. For example, you can ask for an upper or lowercase version of a string. So you can see here, same thing, I have S1 is equal to this is a string, and then as I type S1.to, you'll notice that I have these method calls available. I can say to lowercase, to string, to uppercase. And the Dartpad notation actually informs you that it's a method via that arrow sign saying, hey, when you run this with open and close parentheses, it's going to return a particular type. So notice how methods are called with open and close parentheses to distinguish from an attribute. Now I should point out that documentation will also help you understand what type of object is returned. So you can see here, all three of these methods end up returning a string. Notice that many methods won't actually transform an object in place, meaning the original variable remains unchanged and an assignment must be used. So the method will sometimes actually just not transform the original object, but transform and return, so it's up to you to reassign it. So this will make more sense when we actually code it out. So the upcoming series of lectures will work on giving you bite-sized overviews of each of the major data types and some of their basic methods. What I quickly want to show you is just the way we access that documentation for attributes and methods within Dartpad, and then we'll start our tour. So here I am in Dartpad. I just want to quickly show you the two screenshots that we were talking about earlier. Let's create a variable. We will call it my name, and then let's set that equal to, let's say, a string Jose. And then let's say I wanted to print my name. Well, that's no problem. We can just say print my name, go ahead and run this, and we should see here in the console, Jose pop up. Now let's imagine I wanted to access some attributes or methods. Let's first start with attributes. You can actually see as you start highlighting some of this, the documentation will end up helping you out saying, hey, this is a string, it's a local variable, etc. Then I can hit dot, and then I'm going to see a list of all the attributes and methods that are typically available for a string. The difference between attributes is you'll notice they don't actually have a parentheses call and then an idea that, oh, it's going to return something else. Instead, we have a list of methods that end up showing you that. So first the attribute, probably the easiest one to understand is length. So we'll just do length. And then notice there's no open and close parentheses after this. It's just a piece of information about this string. It's going to tell us how many characters are in this string. Essentially, what's the length of that string. So we're going to run that. And then we will see that it's 4, which makes sense. There's 4 letters there. Now, what about a method call? Well, for a method call, let's take a look at those two uppercase ones. So if I say my name dot to, and then I can go, let's say uppercase. Now notice this one does require open and close parentheses. Now there's going to be some interesting things to understand about doing a method call like this. So I'm going to say my name to uppercase, and I run that method call. and you're going to end up seeing Jose in all uppercase. But what happens if right after this I print out my name again? Is it actually changing this in place permanently? Well, if you run this, you'll notice it does not. So remember, for a lot of these methods, they're not actually transforming something on the original object. Instead, they do the transformation and then can essentially return it, which means you can actually assign the results of that method call. So for example, I can say my upper name is equal to my name dot to uppercase, and that's essentially what that arrow is trying to denote, that hey, when you run this, it's returning something. In line 3, we're able to print out the uppercase because we essentially ran it and said print the result of this. But if I actually want to save this, what I need to do is assign it to another variable, or I could overwrite the assignment to the original one. And then if I say print my name or print my upper name, go ahead and run this, and now you will see all caps Jose, so that's coming from line 3. There's the original Jose, that's from line 5, and then there's all uppercase again when I did the reassignment on line 4 and printed it out on line 6. Okay, so we're going to get a lot more practice with different attributes and methods for a bunch of different data types, but I just want to get you kind of comfortable with the idea that many of these methods don't actually change the object in place. You'll need to do a reassignment. And then as a quick note, you could always reassign the original as well. So if we delete this my upper name and take my name to uppercase, what we can do is, instead of redefining a new variable, I just take my original one and then say my name is now equal to the uppercase version of it. So then when I run this, I do get back it in uppercase twice because I have now reassigned it on line 4. When you're doing a reassignment, make sure not to accidentally type variable again. You only need to do that once when you actually create the variable. Okay, that's it. We'll see you at the next lecture.